I'm Stephanie Karzon Abrams. I'm a neuropharmacologist, which means I study drugs and the brain. I'm very interested in the field of psychedelics, so I've actually pivoted most of my work to plant medicines and to psychedelics. Most of my research is on spinal cord injuries, head injuries, headaches, but I'm also very interested in how plant medicines and psychedelics can support women's health. I recently became an MDMA prescriber, and we'll be able to dive into that and what that means, what the implications are. But what inspired me to pivot a lot of my work, or most of my work, towards this field is, if I look back to when I was in college, I did a research fellowship in the ICU, and most of my patients were all head injury patients. And back then, I was observing that most of the drugs that we give head injury patients are symptom management and what I like to call Band-Aid solutions. And in the acute phase of a head injury, those are very, very useful and practical. But a lot of these patients and individuals are staying on these mental health medications forever. And that didn't seem normal to me, and it was definitely something frustrating. It was definitely something that the whole pharmacy team at that time would discuss, and it was also the center of a lot of our research. And after I did that research fellowship, I actually worked in industry at Johnson & Johnson in medical devices and had a bit of a career change. But when I was looking to return to this field, I had that light bulb moment of, I wonder if psychedelic medicine could actually support people with different neurological disorders, right? So I began to search for people who were doing that kind of work, and I found incredible neurologists who were, and everything kind of snowballed from there. So I still do research, but I also have a consultancy called Beyond the Bench, and it's research solutions, science solutions, and operations and strategies for all kinds of organizations, whether it's plant medicine or plant supplements, but also clinics. So a lot of physicians are trying to start up their integrative medicine private practices, and they're integrating psychedelic therapies as well as a service. So I'll help them get started, ensure that practices are ethical. And it's been an incredible journey doing this work, and I'm excited to be here and talk about MDMA and heart openers and the culture of MDMA and how it, weaves into the science, because I feel that typically we tend to separate both of those worlds, but Jane and I believe that those worlds are very much close together, and you need both. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful to be here. I never thought I'd be talking about psychedelics in Santa Barbara with this groovy crowd. Yeah, it's amazing. My name's Jane Garnett. I'm a psychedelic-friendly psychotherapist, Oxford-educated, and an EMDR practitioner. And I come to this work really from psychology. So I entered psychology after being in the entertainment industry, and I was quite shocked by that transition. Obviously, the film business, the entertainment industry is very dynamic and exciting, and suddenly I was just sitting in these one-on-one situations talking to depressed people, and I'm like, why am I here? What's going on? And I start asking all these questions. So I start taking this deep dive myself in my own life, a parallel track, psychedelics, sexual healing, you name it. I just went on every wild journey I could take while I'm still staying sort of prim and proper in my therapy practice. And of course, inevitably, the world started to collide, and I was getting all of this information from my own research. In my own research, my own personal rogue out there research, I just kept running into my inner child. I kept running into the joy inside me. I kept running into this little kid who just wanted to be herself and feel free, and be in her essence. And then in my sort of grown-up life, I was playing all these roles and, being basically sort of a man in a white coat, which is so not who I am. So I'm evolving, but I'm also sort of being a professional. This is an interesting spot to be in. So of course I start, bridging the gap and telling my clients a bit about psychedelics, and so the worlds are starting to come together, and I start this podcast called Sex, Psychics and Psychedelics, where I'm talking to different healers, and I'm bridging these these gaps basically between, traditional therapy, which is focused on brokenness, and what we're learning from psychedelics, which is we can have experiences of wholeness. And so from this position, from this research position, I find myself back on the dance floor, kind of like 20 years after I used to be, raging in the early days, when I overdid it, and thought MDMA was terrible. Then I'm coming back to the dance floor with these sort of psychologist eyes, going like, holy fuck. There are all these therapeutic principles being applied here. What's working in therapy, what's working in EMDR is working on the dance floor, but like exponentially. Because, okay, what have we got? We've got people looking in each other's eyes. We've got connection. We've got that felt sense of safety. When you take MDMA and you're in a room full of people, you're like, here we are. There's presence, there's safety, there's containment. All these things you're getting in therapy, right? Seeing and being seen. This is very, very healing, being accepted. But you've also got celebration. You've also got embodiment. You've got bilateral stimulation from dancing on the floor. It's like, wait a minute, we're talking about MDMA for like PTSD. That's great. But like, what about for the collective? What about collective PTSD? What about collective healing? So this is where I'm at in the journey, super turned on by this sort of pairing of these elements of joy and these elements of education. So I've got to find out more. This brings me to Stephanie. I'm like, I need some people who know about the fucking science and who also know how to have fun. And
science is fun.
So this is fun. So we're having fun. Yeah. So thank you for joining us in this what I think is a really fun conversation. And so I just want to kind of draw some of your knowledge out of you around this and keep the conversation going. So, all right, let's just start with the science of MDMA. Okay. Let's get some grounding.
Well, I have a question for the audience, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But who has tried MDMA? Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah. Do people generally understand how MDMA works? Raise your hands. I just want to see where I'm coming from. Okay. All right. So I'll just give a little overview. So the interesting thing about MDMA is that it is going to play on three major neurotransmitters or neurochemicals. So you have serotonin, which is known to be mood stabilizer, an uplifting neurotransmitter. You have dopamine, which is motivation and reward, and then you have norepinephrine, very energetic. And what's interesting about MDMA especially is this parallel activation of dopamine and serotonin at the same time, which means that not only are you coming from a place where your heart is open, but every interaction that you have with another person or with a therapist, guide, facilitator is rewarded by that dopaminergic effect, right? So it's like you're encouraged to keep having these amazing, profound interactions and having trust in the people around you, whether they're your friends or they're your guides or facilitators, is a key component to the success of MDMA therapeutically. And then when we use it in a recreational setting, which I'm going to just say is very healing because joy and happiness and connection is healing, you are essentially replicating that same concept that you will find in a doctor's office or in a therapist's office, right? Where if someone has PTSD and is using MDMA as a tool to heal that PTSD, they're changing the narrative around that trauma, right? The trauma is a dysfunctional response to an event that happened. Not every negative event is traumatic, but in the case of PTSD, there is an event that has become traumatic. There's a maladaptive way of responding to these triggers, and you need to remove the emotional load and experience joy.
Well, can I chip in there as well?
Yeah, sure.
I think, a lot of trauma, and this is through the sort of EMDR lens, is there's what happened, which can be, something terrible, obviously, there's a range, but it's how what happened is dealt with and how you're in connection around what happened, because terrible things can happen and we can heal.
And we can be resilient and we can overcome them.
Are we seen in our trauma, or is it something that's hidden or disconnected from? So the weaving back in of the experience. This is sort of where we're at in this conversation I feel like this is my kind of leading edge around this, is like this thing of mirror neurons. So we were just starting to talk about that. Okay, so seeing and being seen, like I was just talking to a client. This was a non-psychedelic session. She was telling me about some terrible abuse in her life that had happened between the age of 9 and 13. So that's a long time to be abused and a very tender age. And as she was telling me, tears were coming out of my eyes, and I cried a lot in the session. They were just coming and coming. And I was like, okay, what's happening here? And, I was expressing the sadness. I mean, not all of it, right? Some of it, the tip of it. She could see it. She could see her sadness in my eyes. And so she could connect to it. So that wasn't obviously not going to take her all the way, but it's touching it, to touch on things together, to be able to look into each other's eyes and say, wow, I'm sorry this happened to you, or wow, I'm delighted that you're here, whatever it is. So there's something about this thing of seeing and being seen, which is definitely established in the therapy dyad. But what is going on the dance floor when you look around and you look into each other's eyes? And I don't know, for me, to look at another human and see them feel safe in my eyes and reveal themselves is one of my favorite things that I could ever experience, and the displays of joy. But so there's this thing, this seeing and being seen that feels so important about, for the fabric of connection. And I know there's this mirror neuron situation going on. Let's talk about mirror neurons.
Okay, quickly. Mirror neurons.
Don't be quick about it because it's important. Does anyone know about?
Okay, let's talk about mirror neurons. So these cells are activated when, let's say, you are learning to do something, and then you see someone doing that very same thing that you are trying to learn. So these cells are activated in that circumstance. And this is so important when we're talking about relearning how to deal. I'm just going to make it very, top level, high level. Or this whole thing about psychedelics, if you want to break it down as to why it's so efficacious and successful, is that it's putting you in this position where you are able to learn in a way that you have not been able to since you were a child. And a lot of the times we need to relearn how to react, right? We need to relearn how to do things, how to think about things. And so psychedelics are opening this critical window of relearning, and it's an actual window that stays open for a certain period of time. And we've even been able to measure that window, right? So ketamine has a shorter window, MDMA has a longer window. And in that window of opportunity, that's where the work happens. That's where the integration and the psychotherapy, talk therapy happens. You are so malleable and open to receiving information and changing what needs to be changed. But on the flip side, if you are not properly guided and the information that is coming in is not positive or is not constructive, it can very much go the other way, right? You could be negatively impacted. But the whole mirror neuron thing here is that social cognition, empathy, even in these cases of trauma, like you explained, if you have emotional triggers that you want to, rearrange or relearn, if you witness other people emoting in a different, more positive, constructive way, you can learn to do as they do because of this cellular neuronal reaction. So it's very fascinating.
Oh, exactly. And that's sort of one level of de-shaming, which is such a big issue, I think, in psychedelics and in healing in general. So that brings me to come downs, and me and Stephanie talk about this, and one of the reasons I rarely do MDMA is because I get big old come downs. And that's something I want to examine more, and I think we should examine it more collectively. Because, this goes to what is chemistry, right? You can say a come down is, just a chemical thing, or you could say, look at it through more sort of psychoanalytical eyes. And, if I look at my come downs, I could say, oh, I have really sensitive chemistry, which is normally how I say it. Or I could say, oh my God, I get so fucking sad. Because in one moment I had this experience when I was connected with all these people.
I know it's Sunday night and you got to work Monday morning, and you're just
But seriously, it's you're like it's heaven, to be in a state of connection. And it's not always like this on MDMA. I'm talking about these kind of peak experiences, where you're seeing and being seen. You're in your body, you're dancing, you're in joy. It's like, yes, we are making love collectively. This is such good shit, right? This is where I want to be. And then, yeah, it's Sunday night and I'm in bed and I've got a headache and I've got my to-do list and my kids want me and I'm not being the mum I want to be and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But really what I'm feeling is I'm so sad because I want to be in that moment all the time. And what if it's fake? And what if that was just drugs, you know, where I was just on drugs? Right?
I mean, I've said this to you before. I think I even had a friend of mine who said, like, MDMA doesn't feel genuine to me because I'm like, it's just this outburst of love and I just love everyone and I'm so happy, but I don't emote that way in my everyday life. So it feels fake to me. And I said, no, MDMA is revealing that this lives inside of you. And I always say that having experience, whether it's MDMA, whether it's another plant medicine or something that is extremely heart-opening, having that heart-opening burst of joy experience, I think teaches us that emotion and that ability lives inside of us, and then we can recreate it on our own without the help of any other substance, right? And
I love her positivity, and I agree. I mean, I really believe that this is a cultivation, and I think we need education around it, and I do think that the misery is going to be there somewhere. If you're going to have that much glory, if you're going to have that much high, you might just as well have that much low. It's expansion and contraction. It's the laws of the universe, and people are not getting properly educated on it. And so what happens is then there's shame, right? If I'm not educated that if I go to a party, you know, that afterwards I might feel like this, or I'll do MDMA in therapeutic context, and then afterwards I'll feel worse. If I'm not properly educated about how to meet myself when I slump, then I'm going to feel ashamed. Right. So I'm going to kind of like re-traumatize myself a little bit. I'll have a great time and I'll bond, and then I'm going to be like, but I just took drugs, you know? So, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, if we have some education around this, you might feel great afterwards if you're an ox like you, okay? But you might feel shit like me, right? So whatever, it's all okay, you know? But I think that I really do think this is one of the problems of MDMA is there's this shame around it. It's almost like we can't handle the glory. It's just like, it's so glorious, it has to be fake. So we're going to feel ashamed because we're these miserable humans. And it's like, well, how about we just expand our definition of what is possible and work towards the high end. It's a goal. It's not a final. We're not going to stay there the whole time.
You said so many things that I want to. No, it's so good. It's so good. Okay, the education piece is huge because whether it's MDMA or any other substance, or just the physical act of partying and staying out late, and let's just lump in alcohol there because alcohol has been used forever recreationally, and that shame from getting drunk and feeling hungover is something that people experience. The shame, and it could feel like another emotion, but I'm going to call it shame. The shame of staying out late and just being like half of a human the next day because you're not productive, because you're tired. All of these things are kind of part of the human experience when it comes to enjoying oneself, right? And I feel like there's two things there. I think we have to reframe that entire thing. I think that, of course, we could enjoy ourselves responsibly, but I also think that if we do feel exhausted, hungover, or whatever it is after MDMA or anything like that, whether it's therapeutic or whether it's recreational, we have to think about why we feel that way. And you talked about the chemical piece, right? So if you go in educated, then maybe you expect it a little more and it doesn't feel as threatening the next day. But the other thing, and I think you've touched on this in one of our conversations, is that everything has a light side and a shadow side. And if you're feeling down in the dumps, you can definitely chalk it up to chemistry. But you could also think about, okay, but why do I feel so sensitive right now? Is there something in my life that is being brought up right now? And do I have an opportunity to sit with it and analyze it? And what I say each and every time is, if you're doing preparation and integration in your therapeutic work with MDMA or any other medicine, you should also do prep and integration work with those same substances in your everyday life. So whether you're with your friends on a dance floor or in their home or in a therapist's office, you have an opportunity to integrate the experience and to fuel it with a little bit of intention. I mean, these substances are mind expanding, they're life expanding. So why not why not fuel it with a desire, a goal, an intention, right? And whether it's light work or shadow work, there's an opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the shadow piece is the least talked about, and right, and it's why I think one of the reasons I think people are just like, danger, danger. And I was like that for many years because I overdid it in my early 20s. I did a lot because I was at Oxford and we were all in our heads so much and we just wanted to have fun and be in our bodies and be kids, you know? So that's what we did. And it was great. And then it's suddenly like, wait a minute, all I'm doing is taking MDMA and recovering. And then I was like, oh, MDMA is bad. You know, I just was like, it's bad. It's bad. It's warping your brain. It's like, it's depleting you. It's not good. Take it away, take it away. And it was the last psychedelic I came back to. And now it's the one I'm most interested in. And I'm most interested in it really because I think two things. One is I think this shadow piece, this come down piece is really interesting. I think it's a massive opportunity for getting to know ourselves and for compassion and for dealing with, if I just use myself as a model, and I doubt I'm the only person in the world who goes through this on an MDMA come down, loneliness, sadness, feeling separation, split from God, split from source. I mean, this is part of the human experience, let's face it. I mean, it's just true. Look around, right? So what are we doing with that? We're going to just hide there or make rules around that and try and never feel that? Or, I mean, good luck, you know, it's not going to happen. That's like, we're humans. So, okay, so there's an opportunity to really grow compassion and education around that piece of like, and it's not just drug come downs, it's just being down. You know, it's just like, what do we do when we're down? And how do we deal with that? And how do we manage that? And even if we feel like we have to go into a hole, how can we feed ourselves compassion there? So I think that's a really important part of it. And then the other part of it, and why I'm so keen on MDMA right now, is really just, you know, this extraordinary acceleration in consciousness that's going on globally, and it's a lot to handle. And it doesn't feel like the rugged individualism model really works very well. And I feel like that's what I've seen from, as a psychotherapist, that it's really great to be in a dyad and it's really great to do one-on-one work. And there's something really precious about that, but it's not enough. It's not enough to affect real change. And I think that there is some real call for collective change right now. And I feel like there are these dance floors and it's happening, but it's not happening with full awareness. And there are these therapy pockets and it's happening, but it's not happening with full awareness. And it's like we're kind of starting to wake up to how we might be more creative together and heal together and become healing machines together. We don't quite know how to do it yet, but I feel like we're learning through these experiences and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, well said. The collective. So something interesting about MDMA therapy is the sessions are extremely long, right? And so that's an expense, you know, for providers. It's a lot of energy, but then for people too, you know, like they're having to commit to 6 hours, and then how often can you do these sessions? So because it is also very heart opening and uplifting and energetic, there's group sessions. You know, people are now looking at this model of therapy that could include maybe up to 5 people, right? Maybe not just one facilitator, maybe a couple. But I love that psychedelic therapy in general, but particularly MDMA, is showing us that we have an opportunity to change the typical traditional therapeutic model. It's also pulling from the history of MDMA, right? So like it was created in a lab and people, the chemists were trying to see how it could be used therapeutically, and then it leaked onto the dance floors, and then it became part of this rave and dance culture, and it became an underground black market drug. But that whole history is extremely important in the progression of MDMA and where we are now, because that's how people got to experience it. And now we're able to use those real life, practical, hands-on experiences to fuel the scientific research and to create a model of history that will, of therapy that is not only sustainable, but that will work for people, right? Because people want connection. What did the pandemic show us? That we didn't like to be isolated, that we want to know our neighbors, that we need to know our neighbors, and we want friendship and community. And so this collective mindset, I feel like we're shining a light on the collective mindset with psychedelic therapy. It's not just about the drug, it's all the lessons that these types of substances and how we use them are teaching us that I think is so important. And it's also spilling into, traditional medicine practices. There's more collaboration between specialists because specialists are realizing that it's not enough to just treat the one thing, that humans have many things and we have to look at them 360 degrees, and in order to care for them, it is a holistic approach. Like, the word holistic has gotten such a bad rap. Like, everybody thinks the holistic is like hippy dippy shit. It's not. It just means the whole person. And traditionally, neurologists and psychologists didn't really talk to each other because they thought that it was two different things, the brain and then the psyche. But it's not. You need both, and humans need that collaboration. And whether it's like a serious medical diagnosis, or it's just you going through something difficult and you need to just move through it, I feel like accessing these tools is imperative. Wow, I could rant on this.
Yeah, I just want to
chip in on.
The holistic word is interesting because I remember thinking the holistic was like a sort of vague word. But it's actually so important in relation to what we're talking about, or my background in this anyway, which was realizing that a lot of the therapy model, the psychotherapy model, is based on this idea of brokenness. Something and trauma work as well, right? Something went wrong.
We need to fix it.
Yeah, we need to understand it, connect. Oh, I'm so glad now I know why my relationships with men are so fucked up, because this happened with my dad, and da 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 da. Awesome. Great. I had another realization of why this is so fucked up, right? All this stuff about the broken furniture, what went wrong. There's some value to that, like we said, to share these stories and to find compassion and to look around them from different angles. But that's just one part of the picture, right? And that's brokenness. That's what happened. It's the past. It's what went wrong. What we're not focusing, and what we know this, right? We focus on stuff and we manifest more of the same, right? So the mental health industry is focusing on brokenness. What are we getting? More brokenness, yay. Okay, so we're not focusing, I'm not just talking about holistic, like looking around the whole human, but the concept of wholeness, right? The idea of wholeness, the imprint of wholeness. If we could really embrace that we do have that inside us, and usually I think the way in is the child. If you don't know where it is, it's in the child. The child is the map of wholeness. It's like the map of the essence of wholeness that exists. But wholeness exists. And as we focus on it, we manifest it. And we've built these industries around brokenness. And I feel like psychedelics can help us have felt experiences of wholeness and then start living lives based on wholeness. And I'm sure this will resonate with you guys. It's just a more gratifying way to live. It's just an embracing of life, But I do want to talk about back into the shadow side of things. MDMA is a huge deal. We know from what's going on, right? There are scary parts to MDMA, and I think there's a good reason people are scared, and there are good reasons that people are cautious, and we want to take these things into account. So, however you're doing MDMA, I think it's really important to understand that it is a huge shift in consciousness, and it's sacred, therefore. This requires respect and understanding and thought and codes and the cultivation of wisdom, because it's still relatively new. So, if we do it in a sloppy way, shit's going to get sloppy, right? And for example, sex in ceremonies, right? People just spilling over, not having any codes about who does what to who, this kind of thing needs to be talked about to really optimize the experience. Otherwise, it's going to continue to get a bad rap. So let's talk about that, like safety, protocols, rituals, any tips?
That's a big question.
I mean, I think, I mean, the sexual side of things, I just think always think about it, always talk about it if you're going into an MDMA experience, you know, with a friend, a lover, a group.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I'll touch on something. So I mentioned at the start that I did my MDMA prescriber training. So what that means, so I live here in California, but I'm Canadian. And in Canada, there's a nonprofit group called TheraPs. They're advocacy, policy, education, but they're also the ones in the Supreme Court fighting for the right to access psilocybin and MDMA therapeutically. So they put together trainings and education for providers, but they created something called the prescriber training. What there is in Canada is a program called the Special Access Program. So this allows for people to access both psilocybin and, well, it was MDMA is pending, but psilocybin and MDMA without being part of a clinical trial. So essentially, if you make a case for why someone should access psilocybin and you present this to Health Canada, which is the Canadian equivalent of the FDA, Health Canada could approve it. And there's amazing manufacturers and purveyors of psilocybin that are actually donating psilocybin for free, complimentary to these patients. And the prescribers, like myself and other healthcare providers, are pairing up with the patient and their clinical team to make these applications and fight for the rights of these patients. And in this course that I did last month, I learned so much, and it showed me that we know a lot more about psychedelics than we think, or that maybe a lot of people think we do. And, you know, we're talking about safety. So like a big thing about safety that we hear is, oh, like, how do we know what MDMA will interact with? Like, what if I'm on these meds and those meds? And a lot of the people who want to access these substances right now, they have other comorbidities and they're taking other medications, so it's of great concern. But on a pharmacology level, we know so much. And what we need to do is we need to trust that the experts that are, you know, that are facilitating these policies, that are doing this research, know who to include and who to exclude. And that starts also with accepting that MDMA is not going to be for everyone. Just because you have PTSD or just because you want to access it doesn't mean that you necessarily can or will. And so I think that's like a big thing that we need to realize, because listening to the criticism of the MAPS study during the audit the other day, that was something that kept coming up, is like the health safety. And like, I get it. It's definitely a concern. But I'm not concerned with that so much, because I know that there's so much research and there's so much understanding. What I'm more concerned about is what you said. So the potential for abuse, right? Like, there's so much bonding that's happening in these rooms with these therapists and these facilitators, and it's so vulnerable. So how do we make sure that the people who are being trained to facilitate, or the people who are facilitating in the underground, aren't doing any harm? So that's like that's a huge thing, and there were harms, unfortunately, you know, in this MAPS study, and that's like a big one. And the other thing is that it's making sure that the right people get access. So being very discerning, and understanding that, like I said before, it's going to start with severe diagnoses like PTSD, but it's going to expand. You know, like MAPS wants couples therapy as well, and I think that it could be an incredible tool. But again, the whole screening safety process it's going to be a whole thing. So I think we're going to need to practice a little bit of patience, because someone said it recently, it's like we're building the plane while we're flying the plane, and that's okay. It's okay, but sometimes it's not okay, and we just need to take our time, right? We need to take our time, because at the end of the day, we need responsible people.
Yeah.
We need responsible people.
Each one of us needs to be a responsible person, which means not, you know, divesting ourselves of our own authority and going to a man in a white coat, any kind of professional, and just being like, you know, and I don't know. And I think that's been going on for quite a long time in all sorts of fields of medicine, and it really is rife for abuse, especially in like healing. And that's what I saw in my own journey, because I saw that I had come to it for my healing. I'd come to being a therapist for my own healing and my understanding, but my healing, you know, and guess what? So does every other motherfucker on the planet. It's like, it's just the deal. And you don't trust anyone who says anything else. It's like, so what does that mean? That means, you know, don't put anyone above you. You know, everyone's in this flesh suit for the first time. We're all learning. We're all trying to figure it out. And yeah, you've studied a bit more of this. I've studied a bit more of that. I'm sure you've all got your areas of wisdom and your areas of blind spots, because we all do. And so, you know, wise up, you know, in these decisions. I think we're all on an adventure and we need to take responsibility and say, okay, who is this shaman? Who is this therapist? Where are they coming from? What does my gut say? You know, there's a real call to like step up the gut, I think.
Yeah, and I think the community of people who are working in psychedelics, generally speaking, and I mean I can't make the whole blanket statement. Generally speaking, I feel like it's people are passionate, and people are passionate about the safety, and they also want to come from a place where if they're making claims or they're spreading information, they're spreading responsible information. They could stand behind what they're saying. That doesn't mean that there aren't abusers out there or people who are being irresponsible with their power, because it does create like a power dynamic, especially with MDMA, with trauma, right? It creates this power dynamic. And there are people that are going to be irresponsible, but that exists everywhere in all, you know, spheres of life. It is definitely very important here because we're talking about human beings and their fragility and their vulnerability in this context. But I think that I have faith generally in this community, you know, like, I don't know if I was telling you this today, but even like I have a group of research last year, we realized that there's a whole patient population with spinal cord injury that could probably benefit from MDMA therapy because of the PTSD. But then we also realized that because of the spinal cord injury, their reaction to MDMA could actually lead to very severe adverse events. So we took it upon ourselves to do the research and publish the paper and try to get the word out that facilitators need to screen. So for me, like just that small thing, right, of publishing a paper and then talking about it, just demonstrates like the values that this community has and that we are trying our best, you know, to put our best foot forward to keep people safe. And I think we also need to just keep spreading the message that people who are going to go through the underground, which is totally legitimate because there's amazing people in the underground, just have to do their homework, right? And to really
people in the underground.
Do your homework. No, and even if it's a person in a white coat, just because they're wearing a white coat doesn't mean that they can't harm you, right? So we have to do our homework, and we need to keep drilling that message of like, educate yourself, ask questions. If you don't know about something, if it doesn't feel right, listen to that voice. It comes back to education every time. The more we have these conversations, the more this culture, you know, of awareness is going to spread.
Yeah, I agree. I think education and the responsibility for your own creativity. So, you know, we can create these structures and we are more and more off-grid. Like, you know, in our last talk, there are people who are coming forwards and saying, you know, we're just doing our own thing over here. We're putting a group together. I'm like if you empower yourself and you educate yourself, you don't need a therapist. Like, you can just do it. And a lot of people are just doing it. But you can do it in a way that's therapeutic and responsible, right? It doesn't just have to be like a, you know, random party. You can be like, okay, we've got this group, we've got this location, we're going to prepare for it, we're going to do integration work afterwards, we're going to have a code around sexual behavior, we're going to, you know, replenish ourselves, we're going to take the right supplements, we're going to, you know, I think this is really beautiful that there can be these, you know, new patterns of empowerment. And yeah, I mean, just going back to what I said about, you know, not trusting the men in white coats, I do feel like the psychedelic folks, I trust more because there's more motion in psychedelics, there's less stagnation. The people who are taking them are moving through things quickly. Shadow, light. It doesn't mean that they've landed, it doesn't mean that then they're stable, but they are learning and growing, so they're alive, and that's really important. I mean, you know.
Should we talk about like heart openers that are not psychedelic.
Yeah. Legal ways to do it legally.
Yeah. So MDMA is an incredible heart opener. It's known as an empathogen, right? It makes you feel into your heart. It creates a big dump of serotonin in between your neurons, right? So a lot of it is circulating. And like we talked about, the come down could be a little bit harsh at times. It's also not a legal drug, so you might not want to partake, right? And you might not know where to source it. So those things are important to think about. And there's so many different rituals and practices that involve just yourselves, maybe like a friend or a partner or a group of friends. And also beautiful plant medicines like cannabis and cacao, kanna, which you took today. Any of you feel anything? Do you feel nice? Yeah? But all of these plant medicines have such interesting profiles because they also play on these same neurochemicals that MDMA plays on, right? They recruit these same neurotransmitters. And you talk about oxytocin, for example, which is like your love hormone, and it really helps foster bonding. And so there are different practices that create a flush of oxytocin, and it's not just childbirth, right? Because when women give birth, there's a big flush of serotonin, and that really helps foster those bonding and love feelings. But something simple is like giving your friend or your partner a hug, not a quick one, like hug each other until melting. I love that. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but like once a week with my partner, we do, if we didn't have it, like if obviously we do it, but we do this like intentional like hug till melting thing, and it actually feels incredible. Eye gazing
it's
too.
The best couples therapy tip actually from
hug
all
till
couples
melting?
therapy. The hug till melting.
Yeah,
is the best
it's
tip.
really fantastic. And look, you didn't need any kanna, you didn't need any MDMA. It's you. There's so much power in you. But if you do want to create ceremony and practice and ritual with a plant medicine, I think that's also super powerful. And, cacao is something that's so easily accessible. Just even like the ritual of brewing cacao is really beautiful. And I think it's a nice thing to do with a partner or with a friend or in community. Or in community. But what makes cacao amazing is you have all these different components. So you have the dopamine, you have the serotonin, you have magnesium, which is very relaxing on the body. You have theobromine, which is a stimulant much more gentle than caffeine. And then you have something called the phenylethylamine. It's hard to say.
Chocolate.
Yes, it's in your your bliss. It's like a bliss molecule, right? And yes, chocolate, the pleasing, textures and flavors. And so doing a little cacao ceremony in community, I think could be very beautiful and stimulating. The kanna, of course, and something that I've been on a kind of journey with is blue lotus, Egyptian blue lotus. That's my heritage, Greek and Egyptian. So I'm really like feeling into that right now. And it is so interesting because it's both peace and tranquility, but it's also very euphoric. And so finding these plants that are, adaptogenic or functional and even sometimes psychoactive, I think is so interesting because you really feel it, right? And so you've created now an environment and a situation where you feel a little out of body or you feel more into your body, and it's legal and it's safe. And I think that it could foster better connection. It could foster and encourage conversations that maybe you don't typically want to have because you're shy. With a partner, you might be more inclined to like share a fantasy, right? And so I think creating these environments that foster connection are really key, and it doesn't have to be MDMA, right? And it could also be things without substances like meditation. We all know that meditation and mindfulness or just practices that encourage stillness are really good for the central nervous system, right? But I mean, meditation is psychedelic as fuck. Like it really is. And if you look at the brains of experienced meditators, there's actually like changes in the anatomy. The prefrontal cortex can become thicker. There could be more gray matter in the hippocampus. Your amygdala, which is your center of like fear and anxiety, can become actually smaller and decreases in blood flow. It's so fascinating. And then a network in our brains that is often recruited in these psychedelic experiences is called the default mode network. And when it's overactive, you have self-rumination, you have feelings of self-doubt, you have distraction. And so quieting that DMN, the default mode network, actually helps us focus and feel calmer. And this is important for people who suffer from depression and anxiety, but also people who have ADHD, who can't seem to slow their thoughts or focus, for a long period of time. And so meditation fosters this state of being where you are open to connection, but you're also open to self-love. And in order to connect, you have to love yourself and have a lot of love for yourself. I love plant medicines. I really do. And I love ritual with plant medicine. I think it really, it helps. I'm like, go, go, go. And when I stop to do any of these things, it's like the whole world quiets. And I'm not thinking about anything else except for that very thing that I'm doing in that moment. And I feel that about yoga. When I'm dancing, I feel that way. I kind of get lost in the music, and people around me are lost in that same music. So you're just like, yeah, we're vibrating on the same frequency. It's amazing.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I just wanted to add your enthusiasm around discovering Blue Lotus. I love that. And it just made me want to speak to the adventure of all of this, really. And, here we all are because of, this adventure ship that you've created and that we're all co-creating. And, I think it is an adventure, this conversation that we're having with plants and different kinds of chemistry. And who knows where that conversation starts? And, it could be in the supermarket, right? This is a sort of contemporary shamanic sort of tool. When you're in Whole Foods, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford Whole Foods, you're floating down the aisles with your cart, and you look over the produce and you look at it not like, oh, I have to get broccoli because I always get broccoli, but like, what is attracting me? What is calling me? What is what?
What is broccoli?
What is broccoli? Who are you? Hello. Hello, apple. But seriously, why not? That's what I do, and it's fun.
But it's true. It's true.
But it is that once you start talking to plants, shit gets really good, and but the conversation becomes more and more subtle. At first it's like, do I like fruit, and then it becomes like, ooh, Blue Lotus or whatever. But what you're doing in that is, you might be tripping out and fantasizing and entertaining yourself, which is fine. But I do believe that also you're switching on your intuition and you're having a conversation with the ineffable, which you kind of have to do anyway as a human, because we really don't know what's up. So we might as well enjoy that, and talk to lemons or Blue Lotus or whatever.
Yeah, I think that when we're starting to discover something new, it could be very daunting, and we want to have all the answers and we want to know everything about it before we do it. Right? And that's like human nature. Yeah. And I think we should get educated. We should know that what we're doing is safe. But once we've checked those boxes, lean into the exploration and the discovery. Don't make it so stressful and so daunting. It's so beautiful to grow in that way and to discover ourselves in these different lights. And the other thing is, you don't need to rip your consciousness open with a massive dose of anything. You can gently explore, which is beautiful. You can microdose, whether it's a legal plant medicine like the Kanna that you just took, or a microdose of psilocybin. You could even microdose the MDMA. But why go full send when you can just dip your toe? And that gentle exploration to kind of feel into it. What does a small, gentle dose feel like? What comes up for me? You want to write it down? Does that journaling process also, add a layer to this whole thing that could be very valuable, perhaps? And then when you're ready, if at all ever ready, then go for the larger doses that can transcend you into another dimension. But you don't need to go full send. And some people never do. Some people don't ever experience a macrodose, and that's okay. You can do so much self-work, and you could tap into so much self-love and appreciation with very small doses, because again, you're creating a ritual, right? And I think just this isn't really part of our conversation, but this is why microdosing psilocybin is so popular, because people are creating a protocol and ritual for their everyday wellness. It's not just about the psilocybin that they're taking. There's actually a study out there that shows that people who microdose have much healthier lifestyles because they're paying attention to how they sleep, how they eat, how they exercise, their social lives, their hobbies, right? So they're creating this life for themselves that's very, very healthy, right? So
yeah, I think that's really the key, is empowering yourself as a creator of your own life, of your own experience, and as a co-creator of all of our experiences of exactly what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. So should we do a little meditation and then do some questions? Yeah.
Do you want to do the partner activity? Do you want to do that?
Yeah. Should we do? I'll just start with a little.
Start. Okay. Okay.
It's a little trick.
We have a little treat for you guys.
No.
You need to be sitting next to someone, so maybe you two can sit together. And then find someone. If someone's sitting alone, just go sit next to them. Let's do it.
I'm just going to drop them in first.
Yeah.
To do the eyes closed thing.
We need two. So if you're by yourself, I'll come do it with you. But is anybody by themselves?
Got one more over here.
You in the back. What is your name? Houston, please come sit at the front here with this gentleman. Okay, look, we're an even number. Awesome.
Amazing.
It's divine.
Wait. This gentleman. Are
is
you guys got each other?
Are you guys together? Okay, perfect.
Buds. Okay, good. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to invite everyone to please close your eyes. And feel the soles of your feet on the ground.
Cross your legs.
Take a belly breath, or wherever you like to breathe. And now bring to mind some image of joy in connection. It might be something you've already experienced, or it might be something you would like to experience. So, imagining yourself in a state of ultimate joy and connection, and whatever comes to mind, go with it, don't judge. And just see how that feels in your body. And breathe into it and sort of like expand into it. Feel into it. If it's not an image, don't worry. It could be a felt sense. Just joy in connection. And just taking another breath with that. And then when you're ready, in your own time, softly opening your eyes.
And turn to the person next to you so that both of your eyes meet the other person's eyes. And start by introducing yourselves. Even if you know each other already, introduce yourselves. You can shake hands. Okay. And after you've introduced yourself, I would like for you to share something with the other person that you really want them to know about you. It could be something fun, it could be something personal, but just something that pops into your mind that you want to share with them, and then vice versa.
They might not want the other person to know anything. No. If I did, I would. Yeah, how about you? This was fun. Yeah, I really liked it. Felt good. Yeah, I love doing this with you. Yeah.
A fun fact.
Yeah, go on.
I really like to sing, and I think that in my past life, I was a full-time artist.
Well, I think in this lifetime you're a full-time artist in your own way, and I know that you like to sing because I was with you in Vegas when you were singing. It was me, yes, it was me. I was there. I know, that was fun. I know, that was hilarious. I liked that whole ride. But yeah, I like this exploration. I think it's fun.
Yeah, and look, it's like different again from the last time.
Yeah, I prefer this. It's more relaxed. And also because we're developing it. We're growing. We're learning and growing together in community. This is a more... No, I know. We have to... I think we need to keep switching up a little bit each time, yeah.
Okay, 30 more seconds. Just wrap up. And if you haven't switched, switch.
How much do you normally take this? Then do you just wrap it up? How do you wrap it up? Oh, okay.
Okay. Let's wrap up our sharing gently and slowly.
Having a nice time.
Wow, look at you guys connecting. You're such great connectors. Okay.
Naturals.
You're very natural, and you'll get to connect further after the talk. But I'm going to interrupt you real quick. You're going to keep facing your neighbor, so stay facing each other. And you're going to look into each other's eyes, and you're simply going to observe each other for about 45 seconds. And it might be uncomfortable, and you might laugh, you might cry, who knows?
It's only going to feel like about 10 years. It'll be fine.
But just feel into it. Just turn and gaze at each other. Feel into it. It's okay if you giggle. Try to slow your breath. If you feel nervous, you can look away for a moment, but return your gaze. And just appreciate the other person. And appreciate that by saying nothing at all, you are still communicating something. And as we come to the end of the 45 seconds, realize the power that is within you to connect just as two human beings. You're here because you are interested in the same topics. You're here because you're interested in community and friendship and interaction and learning. And those things are incredibly powerful and bonding. And whether it's MDMA or dance floors or plant medicines or anything at all, remember that you are the key to love and connection. And if you want to shake hands now or just turn around or hug, you can. It's beautiful.
It's good, yeah. It's good stuff. Yeah. People have different tolerances for it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, for being here, and thank you, Jacob, for having us so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We can move into questions, but yeah, we're hanging out. Yeah.
Got a lively bunch here.
Yeah, okay, cool.
A third mic. Okay.
We have a third mic.
Good. I hope we have some good questions. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay. Come on, kids.
Do we have any questions?
Any questions?
It could be anything. It could be a share, too, if you want to share something or whatever, really. Yeah, Maya.
Yes. Oh.
So the question was about the audit of the phase 3 MAPS MDMA therapy study. So essentially, it was yesterday, right? I feel like all the days are blowing together this week. It was yesterday? Yeah. Okay. So yesterday, there is a panel of experts that gathered, and so there were people from all different walks and all different specialties. You had people from industry, you had different healthcare providers, you had people from Kaiser Permanente, you had this really robust panel. And what they did essentially is they presented their questions and concerns about the study, the MDMA trial. And there were a lot of concerns, and some, I think, were just naysayers, but there were many that were extremely valid. There are holes in the study, unfortunately. One of the major things that was brought up was that there were harms and abuse that happened to some of the participants, right? And we talked a little bit about that, where in this type of context, but just with PTSD, there's so much vulnerability, and with something like MDMA, where you're feeling these rushes of emotion, of joy, love, bonding, there is a power dynamic that can happen, and there are moments where that power dynamic becomes abuse, and so there were cases like that. Another thing was heavy selection bias. So 40%, I believe, of the participants had been MDMA users, and so you can see how that could lead to very favorable reports. There was also an unblinding of the therapists, which means that when the therapists are reporting outcomes, there will be a sway in the positive direction because they know who had MDMA and who didn't. There was a lack of diversity in the group as well. Different racial backgrounds can mean different DNA, which can mean different mutations in the DNA, different health concerns, right? And so you need to be able to evaluate that. There's a long list of things. But what this means is that they voted that the benefits of MDMA therapy did not outweigh the risks. They talked a lot about the structure and how this therapy is going to be carried out for like harm reduction, not just for the patients, but also for the healthcare providers. And the come down, there was like a lot of like structural issues as well, so that it did not outweigh the risks. And they also voted that it was not an efficient treatment, which is not true. I'm just going to say it, it's not true. I think that we have a lot more work to do now. It doesn't mean that it's dead in the water, because the FDA is going to vote on it nonetheless in August. But they're heavily influenced by this panel. And so, in my opinion, I think it's going to be dead in the water. I don't think it's going to be approved, unfortunately, because it's very apparent that the study wasn't carried out appropriately and properly. And so it's going to take now a lot more work. And I think we can do it, but I mean, it's going to take a lot of money as well. So it's like a whole fundraising thing. And I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that a CRO was not hired to consult on the clinical research organization to consult on the trial. So it's just like, these are extremely difficult trials to carry out, and there's so many things to think about, and you really do need to make friends with the people who do run clinical trials. The pharmaceutical companies here, there's a lot of people that work for the FDA that can consult. So I don't know what the course correction is going to be, but there needs to be massive one. And in the interim, the underground work continues, it continues. Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that, if anyone else followed. Yeah, please do.
So I watched the entire session, and I just want to comment on a couple of things and maybe ask a provocative question.
Yeah.
The FDA issued a draft report on last Friday, and that draft report in the first page starts talking about the concerns that you raised. However, what was dismissed by the committee was the extraordinarily large effect of MDMA treatment with psychotherapy. They struggled with the inclusion of psychotherapy because it's so out of bounds with what they normally deal with, And the FDA has no regulatory authority over psychotherapy. So their concerns about psychotherapy, the FDA could not address, nor could they do anything about. That being said, what was lost is first that the FDA approved the study design. So the FDA knew in advance all of these concerns. They knew about the unblinding. By the way, the therapists were not unblinded. They just could tell.
I thought they were actually unblinded.
No, they just could tell. And the therapists did not do the patient rating. An independent, completely blinded set of raters did the rating of the evaluations. Those kind of things were glossed over. The most important thing is most psychiatric drugs have what is called an effect size of about 0.3 to 0.5. That's small. MDMA therapy with psychotherapy has an effect size of about 0.8 to about 1.4. That's huge. It is unprecedented in the psychiatric drug literature. And it's durable. It lasts for months. That is unprecedented.
Wait, when you say it lasts for months, what do you mean it lasts for months?
The therapeutic effect lasts for months.
Okay.
So the reduction in PTSD symptoms lasts for months.
Got it, yeah.
And this is over and above what they saw with psychotherapy alone, which is in itself was effective, about the same as other treatments for PTSD. The panelists came to the conclusion, or came to a consensus, that large treatment effect was driven by expectancy. However, if expectancy drove such a large treatment effect, then they must be onto something.
Right.
Because there's no other treatment that has that kind of effect. So that's not really a plausible explanation. Plus, you mentioned 40% had prior experience with PTSD. There was an analysis of that. So they split the group into those who had prior MDMA experience, those who did not. There is no difference in the symptom reduction, completely overlapping distributions of responses. So that is not an adequate explanation either. The committee, though, I believe, took its lead from the way that the FDA report was written, which the FDA is not going to be an advocate for a drug, ever. They are there to regulate drugs. It is the sponsor who is the advocate. And they overweighted those concerns and then underweighted the therapeutic effect. So my question to you, or both of you, is, in your experience, is it all expectancy? Is it all a magic feather?
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding, because this was what the committee concluded. So seriously.
Okay, let's just refine this question. So is the success of MDMA therapy predicated on high levels of expectancy? No. I mean,
Expectancy
you can't expect what's going to happen. It's not. You can hope to get better, right? Placebo is something. You know that. I mean, placebo is something, and we should mine it. Great. It's another way to mine chemistry, but there's no chemistry like MDMA, and we know that, those of us who have taken it. And from a therapist's point of view, it's a massively powerful tool, and I'm not surprised that there's so much fear around it. And that, I'm glad you've been studying it, and I'd like to hear your synopsis of why you think this is happening. But, to me, I haven't been studying it, but I'm just like, oh, yeah. Of course. I mean, it's pretty terrifying. It's like, this is very, very, very powerful stuff. So there's no way. I mean, I think we should mine it. And this is one of the reasons we're talking about it, because it's like talking about sex. It's fun, right? It gets you feeling sexy to talk about sex. There's the chemistry rubs off on you. There is some reference. but there's talking about sex and there's having sex, and there's talking about MDMA and being excited about taking MDMA, and there's taking MDMA, and they're different things. And you know that because you know when you take MDMA, there's all this kind of like truth stuff that comes out of you, like where the fuck did that come from? And
we
suddenly,
didn't talk about that.
Right?
Truth
It's
serum.
like truth serum. Suddenly you're saying to your partner, I don't love you anymore. And you're like, oh my God, I said the thing I should never say, you know, but it's true. And it came out, and oh shit. And then, oh good, because the truth is out, now we can relax. You know, that's the truth. That's what happens, and it's scary.
So do you ever inquire of your patients or your participants what their expectations are prior to administration? And if so, have you seen that expectation influences the outcome?
If by expectation we're talking about intention, then yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. If I tell you, sorry to interrupt you. Forget the drugs, right? If I tell you, we're going to sit here for an hour and we're going to talk about what's happening in your life, but before that, we're going to set an intention for our conversation. And you're going to tell me your intention, what you hope to achieve, whether it's something you want to achieve in the hour, it's something you want to achieve for the week. Just that very act of setting that intention, you will meet that goal. You will set the intention and you will fulfill it. So now add in something like MDMA that plays neurochemistry jazz in your brain, right? And allows you to now bond with me, trust me when I'm trying to help you recreate patterns that are now going to help you move through this trauma.
Yeah.
So the
Well said.
opinions of the advisory committee was all you need is the intention. All you need
But clearly not, right? Like let's...
Like she said, neurochemical jazz, you know. You need a few more players in the mix, you know.
Well, because if we look at the burden of PTSD on society, like people are not getting better, right? People are staying on these freaking SSRIs their whole lives, and it's messing up the rest of their lives, right? It's like you're on SSRIs and you can't feel anything.
But also, okay, PTSD is reinforcement, right? It's the reinforcement again and again and again and again and again and again. It's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. You can't just interrupt that by saying...
Think about it differently.
Think about it not being dangerous.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Let's have a conversation about it not being dangerous.
This was the conclusion.
Right, and so it's moronic. It's truly moronic. It's a lack of understanding. And let me also say this, SSRIs are extremely inappropriate pharmacologically for PTSD because of dopamine. It's a reinforcement mechanism. We don't want to reinforce. We want to actually remove the feeling from the story, detach it. We want to make them not feel less, but we want to make them feel differently. You need to reconstruct the narrative. So it's not more dopamine that you need, because then you're just reinforcing the same shit over and over again. So unfortunately, when I listened to everybody introduce themselves on that panel, I was like, that's great. You sound like a very intelligent human being in your field, but do you even understand what we're discussing here?
Well, some of them are PTSD practitioners.
Yes, they were.
A number of them.
Yeah. But still, like a lot of them, I feel like didn't like really capped the point here, and it almost sounded like they didn't understand the mechanism of PTSD. And it's just like, how? And then someone even mentioned something about the success rates of SSRIs in therapy.
Yes, somebody made it sound as if our existing therapies of either pharmacological therapies or CBT or EMDR were as effective as what was the data in the clinical trial. And I've not seen that level of response for anything.
Yeah.
Right? No, cognitive behavioral therapy is efficacious, but it doesn't have the effect size, the magnitude of therapy augmented with MDMA. Now, they didn't do CBT formally in the trial, and they could, but it probably would augment CBT immensely.
And also let us remember that this is a tool. We're not saying everybody shift to MDMA, everybody take MDMA. Like, that's not the point here. It's certain people will benefit from it.
The thing is that
Certain
people don't have the reference for many people in many ways don't have a reference for the felt sense of safety. CBT can't get you there. I think EMDR is super effective. I do attachment focused EMDR and it's quite close to psychedelic work. It's very close. I think IFS, EMDR, and psychedelics are like the trifecta, in my opinion. But yeah, for PTSD, the felt sense of safety is a chemical imprint. You can't get it without getting it. You can't feel it without feeling it. It's nobody's fault. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, this is very helpful. And it's a big deal to put the felt sense of safety into somebody's body. Oh, that's scary. What if everybody starts feeling safe around here? What's going to happen? I don't know. I'm curious, what's your takeaway? I mean, you've been studying this. If you had to say what's going on, what would you say?
The vote is non-binding, so these are recommendations. I think that this happens a lot in scientific review panels of all sorts. So I spent 20 years listening to grant reviews at NIH. And very, very often, perfect is the enemy of the good. So many of the committee members expressed wanting to see a pristine experimental design. Right. And you can't have a pristine experimental design with this drug or with this population.
Yeah.
But that's what they wanted. You mentioned diversity. Actually, for the sample size, it had an adequate representation of at least African Americans.
But they criticized it, right?
They
Yeah.
criticized it.
I was just stating what was brought up.
Because there wasn't enough to do a separate analysis. However, that's the sample size the FDA approved. So this study would not have gone forward without prior approval from the FDA. So they knew what the sample size was, they knew what the composition was, they knew that people would be accepted in the study who took MDMA in the past. And by the way, if they took MDMA in the past and that had a positive influence, why are they in the study? They wouldn't qualify. So the review was problematic in the sense that the study was not perfect. Lycos did fail on a number of points. They didn't have cardiovascular measures, they didn't have hepatotoxicity measures, they didn't have positive adverse events, meaning euphoria. On the other hand, and that was a real neglect, the FDA was not happy about that latter part, but MDMA is not a new drug. We know the cardiovascular effects.
Yes, which I was saying earlier, is we know so much about the pharmacology and the interactions. I feel like that argument is just but it should have been included.
Yeah, and so they took the fact that these things were not taken as problematic as opposed to, let's say, deficiencies. So again, their explanation for the actual efficacy data is itself problematic. But there is no opportunity in this type of meeting for a rebuttal. Lycos will make a rebuttal to the FDA. The FDA will take everything into consideration. They will consider the risk-benefit ratio on their own. They will look at the public health need. They have made decisions in the past on approving drugs that were not recommended by an advisory committee that showed minimal efficacy just because there was no other treatment available, most recently for Alzheimer's drugs. So, like Trump said, we're just going to have to make you wait.
I'm so glad you brought him into it. That's great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah.
Jump in? There was a hand in the back.
Was the placebo an active placebo?
No.
No.
No, the FDA, this was a matter of negotiation between the FDA and the
It
LICO.
wasn't. It was inactive or inactive.
Inactive. Inactive because,
Why would they give them niacin or something? Why would they?
because prior studies have shown that it doesn't, that the niacin itself is not an effective placebo in maintaining a blind. And so there was no benefit to the study design by giving an active placebo. They considered giving a lower dose of MDMA as a placebo. That's been done in some psilocybin trials.
Fascinating.
But the problem with that is a low dose can actually be more problematic than a higher dose. What some people call half in, half out. Either you're feeling unsettled, but it doesn't really manifest itself into
That's why
anything.
microdosing is
So
difficult.
the FDA said, no, that's going to bias the results in a negative way.
Do you think there's really a significant chance that they're going to approve it after this panel on something this controversial in terms of potential liability down the road?
Again, the concerns of the committee about the deficiencies in the study design regarding blinding of the therapists and the patients, and the functional unblinding after they take the drug and it's evident who got what. But the fact that the treatment outcome measures were done by blinded raters, and the treatment magnitude is exceptionally large and exceptionally long-lasting. There is nothing in the literature compared to this. The FDA has to balance the concerns raised by the committee with the pressing public health need.
The one thing it can hang on.
It's
There's
a
no other
beast.
treatment
Yeah.
that's effective anyway.
Well, no, there are other treatments. I mean, in the clinical trial, psychotherapy alone had a significant treatment effect. But it is dwarfed by MDMA plus psychotherapy. So it goes into the FDA black box.
It's hard to imagine them approving it. It's hard to
It's hard
imagine it.
But let's imagine.
Yeah, I would like to hold the vision.
Yeah.
I'd like to hold the vision, but it's hard to imagine them approving it.
Maybe they come back in some way.
It'd be amazing if Lycos could rebut it and
Conditions saying you have to do post-marketing.
Oh yeah.
They could ask for another study. They could approve it as is. They could reject it out of hand and say, no, you have to come back with another set of studies.
It will never be a yes right off the bat. I'm so certain.
Yeah, we need more studies. I think it's a
and
good
the
idea.
pharmacovigilance will be huge. The post-com, it will be huge. The implications there.
It's unlikely that it'll be approved without conditions, but that is true of virtually
Many drugs. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a serious thing.
It's interesting though, because look at this. Personally, I studied biopharmaceutical sciences. That was my bachelor's degree. So we were very much into drug development and like how the whole process works. But for many people in the science community, we don't really pay attention to that unless like it's really in your face for a professional educational reason. But look at how everyone's getting involved in the process. I think it's amazing. You know, like people are learning about things that they've never even thought about before, which is I think is super cool. And even being able to have this conversation, having it live yesterday and being able to tune in, I think that's awesome.
It's really interesting timing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah,
It's very cool.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
The benefit for me has been profound. It's been life-changing. And I've been a psychotherapist for 30-some years and have never, and have been in therapy on and off for 30-some years, I've never experienced the profound shift that I was able to get using MDMA in a therapeutic setting. And I did it, I think, 3 times over every 4 months or so, I would go back.
You did it with a therapist?
I did it with a therapist. What do I want to say? So for me, what was interesting is that, I dropped into my body and I experienced my body for the first time. I had no idea I was so disassociated until I was able to connect with my body. And the other thing I experienced was a deep sense of relaxation and pure happiness. What was also curious, and I don't know if you guys have any experience about this, but I vomited, and it had nothing to do with nausea. It was like an energetic purge. And the first time, and I was happy doing it.
Yeah. Let it out, baby.
And it was so interesting because the first time it was like coming from my solar plexus, where I know I've stored all kinds of like suppressed energy. And then later in the session, and then in future sessions, it came from my heart chakra area, and then eventually from my throat. So I imagine that I just have this energy that's been blocked, and it helps me moving it out and through my body. And then for me, I had a life-threatening illness, and I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And sorry that my voice is shaky. It's partly, I'm on medications, pharmaceutical medications, that make me this way when I get a little bit of adrenaline. So I'm apologizing for the shakiness. So I had this very rare illness. It was autoimmune related, and it destroyed my kidneys. I had a transplant in 2010, and 2 days after the transplant, the disease came back. And the doctors told me, basically, you're in a category now where it's almost hopeless, and 4 out of 5 transplant centers would not do another transplant with me again. The one that would was the one that did it the first time. It was just the grace of God and this director who was in his 80s and who has been around the block, and people did whatever he said. And he said, let's do it again, but you have to wait until you get a deceased donor kidney. So I was on dialysis for 10 and a half years, waiting. And during that time, I said, okay, I've got to do something to heal my body. So I feel that, for me personally, the psychedelic medication had helped me heal from the inside out, my body, based on Bessel van der Kolk's work. That's all I had to go on. And it's like, I knew the doctors thought I was out of my mind, and I didn't even bother trying to explain it to them. But that's the path that I went on. And with a 0 to 20% chance that this was going to work, I ended up having this transplant and blew everyone away. It's like the disease didn't come back this time. And it's been a year almost. So anyway, that's my story.
Wow.
And,
beautiful.
Yeah. And I can't go back to doing therapy the way I used to. Yeah. After having this, so it makes me very angry that the FDA is not approving it.
Yeah.
And I knew from the beginning, it's like, I don't have time to wait for the FDA to approve this. I'm just doing whatever I can do to get a hold of this with the right people and to do this for myself. So anyway, I'm working on a paper to write, a paper for a professional magazine, just because I think the story needs to be told, even though, again, it's a case study of one, but I am a complete, it transformed my life on many levels. But I was curious about the vomiting part.
Yeah, vomiting, that's really, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. I have so much respect for what you've been through and for your intuition that got you to take radical measures and get out of your mind. Interesting terminology, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we should all get out of our minds and into our bodies occasionally. Yeah, the vomiting is, that's a big part of shamanic tradition. I was introduced to that with ayahuasca, is it's this idea of purging, that you're getting rid of toxic sort of energies, clusters of energies that are residing in your body. And it's interesting, you had, you were purging from your solar plexus, and the sun came out and you experienced bliss and joy and being in your body. And so these things that were blocking you and disassociating you. And again, it's so interesting, you don't know, and I'm your sister in being a formerly disassociated therapist. You don't, and I'm sure a bunch of people at the FDA are like this, and many people in our whole world are like this. You don't know you're disassociated until you reassociate. So you're like, oh, I'm in my body. Oh, I have a body. It's like you don't know until you know. And it's just one of those crazy things. And that's why you have to get out of your mind and you have to try new things, because And often it's adversity that will push you into those situations, right? You feel so depressed, or you're in some horrible physical situation. You're like, fuck it. I'll have to go out of the box. I'll have to go out of my mind. I'll have to go off grid, off piste, whatever it is.
That's why, I mean, it just makes me nervous that we have all these people in white coats up in their heads, very intelligent people.
Yeah.
But that's not where it's at.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
anyway, that's just,
Yeah.
for whatever it's worth, I just felt like I wanted to share that in case it was helpful to anybody else.
The person I feel bad for today is Rick Doblin,
Yeah.
who I met, I know it's more than 35 years ago because he hadn't started MAPS yet. And he was a scruffy little kid who had gone to New College in Florida, and he was, like a lot of people, he became messianic about MDMA.
Yeah.
I'm one of those myself. And I call him the Pied Piper of ecstasy. And I feel bad because he said at the time, he said, I'm going to fight this on the inside. And he went back to Harvard. He got a PhD at the Kennedy School. His thesis was about getting MDMA cleared and getting it through, and he's put in an enormous effort. He's devoted his life. He's built an immense organization. I can't conceive that they're going to actually approve this after straight out. It's just I hope I'm wrong, because to me the therapeutic aspects of MDMA are stunning, and I've witnessed it for almost 40 years. I've done it hundreds of times. And I want to just give one anecdote, and I want to talk about one important issue here about the days after that we talked about. But the anecdote happens to be about Charlie Grobe, who was a psychiatrist at UCLA, an acquaintance of mine, who did some early work with MDMA. And he had some studies where there was a series of I think it was 4 times or so that people were dosed. And it was a double blind. They were trying to do it way back then. This is back maybe in the 90s. Anyway, after about the second session, he has one of the men in the study come to him and ask to be let out of the study because he was having reactions after the experiences that were just overwhelming, and he was emotionally distraught, and and of course Dr. Groban, of course, and he let him out of the study. He broke the blind, and he found out that the guy was on the placebo. This is apropos of what's so. This guy was having that response on the placebo. The one issue I want to talk about is just there's maybe a little confusion about it is unlikely after people get onto MDMA, there is unquestionably, especially if they chase it for a weekend, which you shouldn't do, they really have a physical downtime. You're going to feel like you went to the gym, even if you just did one and a booster one night. But there's a difference, and I wanted to clarify this point, between the day after when you're feeling like you've physically spent and that Monday morning or Tuesday morning depression that starts to come up for people. I did it hundreds of times before I had that reaction on the Monday or Tuesday morning. And some people never get that reaction.
Yeah.
But it's fairly... But most people don't get it right away. And so the implication here that with so many drugs, you get $1 and you pay $1. You do some coke and then the next day you're tired. You're paying for it. To me, the magic of MDMA is you can get $1 million experience on a $10 trip. And it isn't necessary. It is necessary that you're going to feel physically spent, especially if you're 80 years old like I am. But you're not necessarily going to have a depressive issue. And when it finally developed for me after many years of MDMA, and I said, damn, I can't do this anymore, I've been microdosing LSD now for several years, and I no longer have the morning after problem. As long as I'm a good boy, and I don't chase it for the whole weekend, and I do maybe one and a booster.
As long as you take enough LSD.
Well, the LSD I take is I microdose LSD, so I'm taking 10 micrograms.
No, I got it.
Microdose. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point for people who haven't necessarily done this. There is the day after fatigue, but it isn't necessarily so. One final point on that, I remember talking to an early researcher who told me there are no side effects. It's all psychological. And his view was, You have this marvelous time on Monday. You're with your significant other. You have a fabulous time. You love each other. You remember why you loved each other again. It's spectacular. You love the world. And then on Monday, you're at the office, and some schmuck in the next cubicle, says something stupid, and you're back into your old world, and you've surrendered that great ground that you saw on Saturday night. So, can you integrate the experiences? Yeah. Can you bring them into your world? That's one of the key elements here for avoiding that form of psychological after effect. Yeah. Otherwise, it looks like just microdose a little LSD and that'll fix it. Anyway, thank you very much for the floor.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. I just wanted to join you on the Rick Doblin piece. I totally agree. I've been thinking about him all day, and he's such an amazing soldier for the cause. But, as a counterpoint, did you go to the Denver? I did not. So it was such if we kind of collapse time in this arrangement and we just look at Rick and, a life of being a soldier of fortune, he obviously big highs and big lows, right? When you put yourself on the line like that. And that was a real high. I mean, it was just a huge achievement. I went to one of their earlier conferences, and it was tiny and it was just burgeoning, and now it's huge. It's huge, and it was like he was just, beaming. He was so fucking happy. Wasn't it wonderful? I mean, it was so beautiful. And so, yeah, he's an epic dude. He really, really is. And I mean, I could never do it. Putting on the suit and going to talking to these people every day, just like nightmare. So he's amazing, and yeah, I wish him every success and feel for him today, definitely. Yeah, thanks for your share.
I loved what you said about the schmuck in the cubicle, because we were talking about that. It's whether you do it recreationally or you do it therapeutically, you have an opportunity to integrate, but that also means that whatever lessons that you've learned, lessons from the dance floor, as I like to call them, in that moment where you feel like nothing can be wrong and you have so much appreciation for your loved ones, like you need to take that and spread it across the days that come after. You can't just revert. Yeah. Right? If you evolved with the experience, continue to evolve. So I think that's really important.
But it's reinforcement, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's remembering to flip the telescope.
You
right?
have to.
Oh, I'm looking through the wrong lens. If I look through the eyes of love, if I look through the
right, and it could take a couple times, right?
Just a couple.
It could take a few times, but then I think, and the thing that I've noticed is, the first time that I tried MDMA, one of the first things I noticed was the people around me, the types of people that were doing it. And I was like, oh, I like these people. Who are these people? I want to be surrounded by this acceptance and this love and this curiosity, and not like when you're like a 20-year-old girl, like society doesn't really foster very friendly, like it can be very competitive and catty. And I remember the shift. I was like, oh, I want to hang out with these women that are complimentary and they're warm and that are accepting. And so you can see that through these practices, people's mindset changes and there's a culture change, and there's a reason why we call it the Burning Man culture, right? It's like people are like, oh, well, when you're at Burning Man, everything's like this. I'm like, well, why can't that be your everyday life? Like, why can't you practice some of these principles, bring them into the default world? So when you're at work and there's a guy in the cubicle that's being a jerk, like, okay, remember patience, compassion, right? So be the evolved human that you learned to be on the MDMA.
Yeah, exactly. That's when it gets interesting, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the real magic happens, alchemy. And I think that isn't talked about enough. I mean, for me now, and it's not necessarily MDMA, but when I go on a medicine journey, it's housekeeping for the most part. I mean, unless it's like a communal joy experience, but if I do it on my own, it's like writing down, like taking inventory of my relationships. How's it going with my kids? How's it going with my ex-husband? How's it going with my boyfriend? How's it going with, my best friend? How do I feel about myself? What's going on with my house? What's, output, input, just like inventory, the whole picture. And, so you're getting a map of what you want to work on. go into the medicine experience, receive, come out, write it down, and take action. That's the bit I've learned now, because I used to be like, which do I take action? Now I trust, and now I'm just like, I trust. I'm going in to do my housekeeping. I'm not going in to like, have an experience. I'm going in to do my housekeeping. Going to like check out my heart, see where I'm off, see where I'm being an asshole, check it all out, come back out and do my work and like make it better. And it works.
You have to take the action, because writing
You
it
have
down,
to.
okay, you wrote it down, okay, you thought about it, okay, the truth came to you, okay, great, but then what?
No,
What are you going to do about it?
I know. I got into such an impasse with my ex-husband over money, and it was just one of those things. Like, I hadn't factored in all the college fees, and I was just like, I just didn't want to think about it. And he was furious, and like, we were in a total impasse. I was like, I've got to take some medicine around this. Took the medicine. You know, I couldn't get into empathy with him before the medicine. I took the medicine. I literally found my way into his shoes. I wrote it down. I gave him the letter. He read the letter, and he was like, holy fuck, that's exactly how I feel. I'm so glad you understand how it feels in my shoulders around the money and the da-da-da-da-da-da. It's fucking transformational shit. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken the action. I could have just talked to you about it. I could have been like, my ex, I get it. So putting it into action and trusting that, I think is super important. Obviously, you know, the big pieces when you're first doing medicine and it's like, get a divorce, leave your job. And I think, you know, those things you want to like simmer a little bit. Just
don't take
feel
action
it
right away. Just wait a second. Sleep on it. Sleep on it.
One night's sleep, you'll get it, yeah.
And also just going back to that, the power of empathy, the power of self-love and acceptance, and going back to what you were saying about just like the criticisms of how, like legacy therapies can do the same thing as MDMA. Well, people who suffer from PTSD often have not felt love for themselves in a long time. And MDMA will make you feel love and appreciation for yourself, for your body on this earth, for your life. And I'm sorry, but I don't think those legacy drugs are doing that. Like they're clearly not. So it's like, how do you measure that?
How do you measure that? Exactly. It's big stuff. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.